Hey everyone, this is Stanford. I just want to go over the steps with you in case you were absent for the when I went over the Bob Ross drawing, the celebrity self-portrait. So I'll go over the steps on how to make the grid, and then I'll do an example of drawing a partial square or a whole square on here so you have an idea of how to attack the drawing as well as make the grid. So the first step that you need to do is figure out what celebrity you're going to do and print this out full size, 8.5 by 11 copy, and it has to have clear resolution, and it also has to have a good value range. So what I'm saying when I'm talking about good value range, it should have a lot of darks and lights and all the grays in between. So let me show you an example of what I mean. Here's one of our value scales that we have done in the past. You can see that in the value scale you have highlight, direct light, reflected light, shadow, and accent shadow. Now if you look at this drawing here, that light out of the way, you can see, or on the copy paper, you can see the printout of Bob Ross has all these types of lights. It's got the highlight here and here. It's got direct light, which is all this area on his side of the face. It's got the reflected light, which is all this shaded area over here. It has shadows, which are the darker areas in those areas around the eyes and the nose, maybe in here. And then it has the accent shadow, which is the super dark areas like this part of the hair, the pupil on the eye, the corners of the mouth, and those areas. Some of the eyebrow. So it has a good range of values. So whatever you choose, it's up to you. Just make sure your printout has a good range of values so you can repeat it when you draw it. Once you have your printout full size, good resolution, you're going to want to draw a grid over the top. You can see that I've already done that on here, and I did it with a ballpoint pen. Doesn't show up very well. It's a black ballpoint pen. If you have a colored ballpoint pen that is going to show up on, black and white and gray, that's probably a good idea. But you can see I measured a 2-inch grid. And what you have to do is basically put your ruler on here and mark every 2 inches all the way down. You're going to run out of a little bit of space here because what you have left over is 1 inch. You just run into that. So just be aware of that. When you get to that point, you won't be confused. You're going to flip it sideways this way and mark 2 inches all the way down this way, and then you get down to this point and you are also going to run out of room. So it just has a 1/4 inch left over that you have to worry about or think about anyway. Just make sure it lines up on that same side. Now you can see I've already done a grid and I've already started the drawing, and the drawing process is just basically doing a line drawing and then shading in those areas. So I'll go over that in a little bit with you, but let's make a grid so you have an understanding of how to make the grid on the drawing paper. So the drawing paper is 9 by 12. It is actually larger than the 8.5 by 11 copy paper, so we want to center it a little bit on this paper before we duplicate it. There is a 1/2 inch border up here and a 1/2 inch border down here and a 1/4 inch here and a 1/4 inch here, and that will help center whatever size our copy paper is in the center. All right, so let's make the grid on the drawing paper. Here's a nice sheet of drawing paper. What I do is I just mark the top and bottom and the sides with 1 notch. Here's a 1/2 inch right there. So make sure you're going from the line, not the edge of the ruler. And then just draw that line all the way across. Make sure your ruler is square to the edge of your paper so you have a nice straight grid. And then a 1/4 inch on these sides. Let's go to the opposite side. And just make sure that ruler is square to the edge. And then a 1/2 inch on the opposite end. And there we go. Before we move on, let's erase those corners. We want this to have good craftsmanship, clean border. Okay, there it is. Here's the top of our paper, there's the bottom. Now, after you've made the grid on here, you want those weird areas where you ran out of room to be on the same side. So I want this gap to be over here, and then I want this gap to be down here. So what I'll start doing is just measure the top down every 2 inches. Make sure you're measuring from the top of your border, not the top of your paper. And then I just mark 2 inches all the way down on both sides. And then when you get down to 10, you have that extra inch back down there. You see that? Slide the ruler over so you can do the same thing on that other side and it matches. So when you draw your lines across, they're straight. Okay, there's that. Let's go ahead and mark these going all the way across. And if they're not totally lined up, well, that's way off. It's all right, let's remeasure that. 2 inches. This side wasn't exactly 2 inches. It might have been the angle I was looking at. So that's probably going to throw off everything on that side. Let's redo that. That's pretty close. Might have just been the angle that was throwing it off. Yeah, that one's a bit off too, but as long as it's square to the paper, shouldn't be a problem. Okay, and then let's make sure that our short end is here, so I just measure down this way every 2 inches. And then I will run out of room about there. And mark it the same way on the opposite side so it lines up. Okay. The more accurate you make your grid and measure it precisely, the more accurate your drawing is going to be. If your grid's really distorted, it will distort your drawing. If it's a little bit off, it won't be a problem. Now, the reason why we're doing a grid is to make this drawing really accurate, and we're going to be isolating each square and doing one square at a time so that you can be really accurate. If you're trying to draw a face, by looking at a face, it becomes very intimidating. But if you separate each section into squares, you're just drawing shapes and lines, and that's the key to being successful here. All right, so my grid over here matches my grid on my photocopy. Now, last step I want you to do is cut out some 2-inch squares on some blank paper, like that. And you can use this for blocking. So I'll help you do that right now. You're gonna grab some extra copy paper or scratch paper, whatever you have handy. Get 2 sheets and put them directly on top of each other. Draw a square, 2-inch square, about in the center of that. I'm just eyeballing where the center is. And then just try to draw a nice square 2-inch box. This will match the squares on your grid. Now, since we're just using this to block out our paper, we don't need this to be fancy. So I'm not going to try to dig that square out of there. I'm just going to cut a line right to it and then cut it out. That'll be a lot easier. Just like that, no problem. If I go over the line, that's great. Just make it so it's easy to cut out. If it's not perfect, that's all right too. We're just using this to block, so it should be close enough. And there is our blocking paper. Get rid of that. Okay, let me get my grid back in front of me, my drawing back in front of me, and now what I want to do is block out the areas I'm not going to be working on. So say I want to work on this area. Let's do that corner up there. I block that out. So I'm not worried about the rest of the face. I'm just worried about drawing right here. Now once I get a little further on my drawing, I can block out the rest of my drawing and just put this on whatever square I'm working on. So let me show you the one I've already been working on, and I'll demonstrate drawing the section in here. All right, you can see done a little bit of a hard part, the eye. This is pretty easy. It's just shapes in the hair and shading it to the right value. So I've already done that one. So let's take you to a harder one. I'm gonna do the other eye. So I'm blocking that one out. And then I'll also block out on my paper here. All right, so it might be a little difficult drawing that eye, but the rest of it is just shading some basic shapes and lines. So I'll start by drawing this eye, and I want to locate it right about there. So I'm going to kind of measure down exactly where that's going to be. And if you put your ruler on there, you can see that the eye is about 1 3/4 down, maybe a little higher. So I'm going to kind of mark that just so I have an area of where to start from. That's about the bottom, and then the top is about 1 1/2 down. So about there. That's about the thickness of that eye. It's going to be over about 1 3/8. So 1 3/8 is 1 2 3 right there. So that's about where it's going to start. It's going to be in this area. That will help me just get me a start of where I want to put it. Now I just need to craft the lines and the shape. So it starts here, and it goes right to the edge of the paper, kind of curved line like that. And there's the bottom of it, and then there is the other section. So the eye itself is probably the most important part of this drawing. Let's draw in a pupil. That's really dark right there. Sorry, that's the iris. And we can kind of see where it goes, almost touching the edge there. Okay, and then we're gonna have a really dark pupil in there, and we'll shade that in really dark. Once I get some of the shading in here, then I'll smudge the whole thing, so I'll have all of that direct light everywhere. Eye looks a little weird right now, almost like a bird's eye, but I'll go in and touch it up. Okay, and I got a really important line right here. So you want to find those important lines, and it kind of comes down. And this kind of extends that way. That's a little better. Might have been a little thinner. And I'll keep working it until I get it pretty until I become pretty satisfied with it, right? Just like that, and then this kind of goes that way. Let me kind of fix that a little bit. It goes that way and then that way. Probably doesn't go, I guess it goes that way. And then this is thickened up a bit in here. Okay, and then there's going to be a lot of shading in here. A little darker. Later on I'll come back, or I'll start right now. Erase that highlight into there. I don't really want to draw around the highlight, I just want to leave it white. This is going to be all shaded. I'm going to get into the eyebrow. I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of a shape here. know there's a line that comes down that's pretty important to this drawing. And it goes up like that. And you can see there's a shape here that's shaded in pretty well. This might need to come over more. Well, I can figure that out later. All right, that's basically all the major details that I can see. There's some shading here. So now what I want to do is maybe get some of this shading up here, and I believe this is his hair that's coming down. And it's kind of squiggly. So I'll kind of lightly shade this in like that. And then I will smudge the whole thing. You can see where it's a little darker in some of those areas, so I'll shade a little more heavily. And I don't know if this is hair coming down in this area or what that is. I'm going to go ahead and smudge it so I have that direct light taken care of. Okay, now it's just a matter of going after those dark areas. So find all your dark areas, darken them up quite a bit. This stayed pretty dark. Around the eye it's really dark. And then in here it's pretty dark, so I'm going to go ahead and shade that in. Gets a little lighter as it comes out. And I keep adding shading to these areas. But other than the eyes, the rest of it should just be drawing shapes and lines. The eyes you can see are eyes, so that's where it's a little intimidating. Some darker values in here, so just kind of start shading in with another layer wherever you think it's a little darker. So this whole area here on this side of his nose is a little darker than that other side. So I'm going to go ahead and put another layer all in around in here. There we go. And then I can kind of just go up into those areas that are darker and just shade. And I'll come back with some more detail work later. Once you get a basis structure in there, then you can go back in and refine and touch up and add more darks and lights. Fix all your little mistakes and details. And then down in here, it's quite a bit darker too. All right, I'm going to smudge again. And then I just add contrast. All right, I'm going to take this off just to see where it looks like and see where I'm at with the rest of the drawing. All right, so not too bad. Once you get basically all your sections done, then you want to join them together where there's a little bit of spacing where the squares were at, so we'll kind of camouflage that. All right, and once I get a little further along, I'm going to come back to my drawing when it's done, and I will add more darks to get that intense contrast, so the darks really make things pop out. All right. I'll do another video soon when I get a little further along to help you guys kind of guide you through the rest of the process here. All right, hope you are able to get started and figure out who you want to do for your celebrity and do the grid. Make sure you draw contour line drawings first and then fill in the shading. Thanks, have a great day.